I am Dr. Queen, and today we are discussing a topic that sounds like science fiction, but is rapidly becoming a reality in your local grocery stores and restaurants. We are talking about the emergence of what many are calling the new meat, and the growing narrative that eventually consumers may have very little choice but to transition toward these alternatives. Whether it is lab-grown cellular meat, plant-based analogs, or even insect-derived proteins, the landscape of what we consider protein is undergoing a massive transformation. As a medical professional specializing in senior health, I believe it is my duty to explain the biological and nutritional implications of this shift before it is mandated by supply chains and environmental legislation. For decades, we have relied on traditional livestock as our primary source of essential amino acids, B vitamins, and heme iron. But the systems that produce this meat are under immense pressure from climate mandates and sustainability goals. This has led to the rapid development of cultured meat, which is grown in massive steel bioreactors using animal stem cells. The process begins by taking a small biopsy from a living animal and then placing those cells in a nutrient-rich soup that mimics the environment of an animal's body, allowing the cells to multiply and form muscle tissue. While the industry promotes this as a cruelty-free and efficient way to feed the world, we must look at the microscopic reality of what this means for your gut health and your metabolic system. One of the primary concerns from a clinical perspective is the use of growth factors and synthetic hormones required to make these cells grow at an accelerated rate outside of a natural organism. In a traditional cow or chicken, the animal's own immune system and liver filter out toxins and regulate growth. But in a bioreactor, these cells are essentially in a sterile vacuum where every input must be chemically controlled. We also have to consider the nutritional density, because while lab-grown meat may look and taste like a steak, it often lacks the complex profile of micronutrients that come from an animal grazing on natural pasture. For seniors, maintaining muscle mass is a matter of life and death, and the bioavailability of the proteins in these new meats is still a subject of intense medical debate. Furthermore, we are seeing a significant push toward plant-based meats that are highly processed and loaded with methylcellulose like hemoglobin and high levels of sodium to mimic the texture and flavor of real beef. As a doctor, I worry that people who think they are making a healthy choice are actually consuming an ultra-processed food product that can drive systemic inflammation and worsen hypertension. The title of our discussion today mentions that you may be forced to eat this, and while that sounds extreme, we must look at the economic reality of carbon taxes on traditional farming and the way large-scale food distributors are shifting their investments. When traditional meat becomes a luxury item that only the ultra-wealthy can afford, the vast majority of the population will be directed toward these bioengineered alternatives as their only accessible source of protein. This is why understanding the truth behind the new meat is so vital for your health today. We have to ask ourselves what happens to the human microbiome when we stop consuming natural animal fats and replace them with chemically stabilized seed oils and lab-grown fibers. The transition is already underway, and at Dr. Queen Senior Healthcare, we are seeing the early signs of how these dietary shifts affect blood sugar regulation and hormonal balance. The goal of this explanation is not to cause panic, but to empower you with the knowledge of what is actually happening in the food science laboratories so that you can make informed decisions while you still have the choice. Your body is a biological machine that has evolved over thousands of years to recognize and process natural whole foods, and introducing these synthetic structures on a mass scale is a global nutritional experiment with no long-term human data. As we move into the next part of this script, we will dive deeper into the specific chemical additives found in these new proteins and why the sudden push to eliminate traditional meat might be hiding a looming health crisis for the aging population. Continuing our investigation into the chemical architecture of these emerging proteins, we must address the specific additives that allow a plant-based or lab-grown substance to mimic the sensory experience of a traditional steak. At Dr. Queen Senior Healthcare, we are particularly concerned with the high levels of sodium and processed binders found in many of the new meat products currently hitting the market. To achieve the right texture food, scientists often use methyl cellulose, which is a chemical compound used in everything from laxatives to wallpaper paste as a thickening agent. While it is considered safe by regulatory bodies in small amounts, the long-term consumption of high-dose emulsifiers is linked to the disruption of the gut mucosal barrier, which can lead to chronic inflammation and leaky gut syndrome. Furthermore, many of these new meat products rely on soy leg hemoglobin to provide that characteristic bleeding effect and metallic taste of real meat. This is a genetically engineered protein that mimics the heme found in animal blood, but it is a novel substance in the human diet, and we do not yet have decades of data to understand how it interacts with the endocrine system, especially in seniors who may already have compromised metabolic health. From a clinical perspective, the sheer amount of salt required to make these synthetic proteins palatable is a significant risk factor for hypertension and cardiovascular disease. In many cases, a single plant-based patty contains significantly more sodium than a traditional beef patty, which can push a senior's daily intake well over the recommended limits, leading to fluid retention and increased pressure on the kidneys. We must also talk about the economic and regulatory mechanisms that are being put into place, which might eventually limit your ability to choose traditional animal products. Across the globe, we are seeing the introduction of carbon footprints for food items and discussions surrounding meat taxes, designed to discourage the consumption of livestock. As the cost of traditional farming rises due to these regulatory pressures, the price of real meat will naturally soar, making it inaccessible for many people on a fixed income. This is where the forced element comes into play, because when the market is flooded with cheaper bioengineered alternatives and traditional options are priced as a luxury, the average consumer is steered toward the new meat by financial necessity. For someone managing their health in their later years, the loss of access to high-quality bioavailable animal protein is a serious concern. Traditional meat provides essential nutrients like vitamin B12 and zinc in a form that is easily absorbed by the human digestive tract, whereas many of the new meat alternatives rely on synthetic fortification to reach similar nutrient levels. There is a vast difference between a vitamin that is naturally occurring in the tissue of a pasture-raised animal and a synthetic isolate sprayed onto a processed protein slab. The bioavailability of these nutrients, meaning how much of the vitamin your body can actually use, is often much lower in processed substitutes. This can lead to silent deficiencies in seniors, which may manifest as cognitive decline muscle wasting, known as sarcopenia, or a weakened immune system. At Dr. Queen Senior Healthcare, we believe that the push for these new meats is being driven more by corporate efficiency and environmental metrics than by a desire for better human health outcomes. We are also seeing the emergence of insect-based proteins being ground into flours and added to meat substitutes as a sustainable alternative. While insects are a source of protein, they also contain chitin, which is a fibrous substance that many humans find difficult to digest, and which can trigger allergic reactions in people with shellfish sensitivities. The medical community is still debating how the regular ingestion of these chitin-rich proteins will affect the inflammatory markers in the human bloodstream. We have to look at the total metabolic load that these ultra-processed new meats place on the liver and the heart. When you replace a single ingredient whole food like a piece of chicken or beef with a product containing 20 or 30 synthetic ingredients, you are asking your body to process a chemical cocktail every time you eat. For an aging body that already has a reduced capacity for detoxification, this can lead to a buildup of oxidative stress. Our mission at Senior Healthcare is to ensure you understand that while these products are marketed as the future of humanity, they are essentially a massive, uncontrolled study in human nutrition. You must stay vigilant and read the labels of every new product you encounter because the branding may say it is better for the planet, but the ingredient list might say it is worse for your heart. As we move into the final part of this discussion, we will look at how you can navigate these changes to protect your health and what steps you can take to ensure you are still getting the nutrition your body truly needs in a world of bioengineered food. in the final part of our comprehensive look into the global shift towards synthetic nutrition, we must address the most critical question, which is how you can protect your physical integrity and your longevity in an era where your food choices are being systematically narrowed. At Dr. Queen Senior Healthcare, we recognize that for a senior body, the quality of protein is not just a lifestyle choice, but a fundamental medical requirement to prevent sarcopenia, which is the rapid loss of muscle mass and strength that leads to falls and loss of independence. When we look at the new meat alternatives, we see that while they might provide enough total protein on a nutrition label, they often fall short in the specific amino acid profiles needed for muscle protein synthesis. Specifically, the amino acid leucine, which is the primary trigger for building muscle, is far more abundant and bioavailable in natural animal products than in lab-grown or plant-based isolates. If you are forced by cost or availability to consume these new proteins, you may find that despite eating the same amount of calories, your body begins to waste away because it cannot effectively use the synthetic building blocks it is being given. Furthermore, we must discuss the long-term impact on your genetic expression and your immune system as we transition away from the foods our ancestors have consumed for millennia. Your DNA is programmed to recognize and utilize complex natural molecules, and when we introduce highly processed synthetic proteins, it can trigger an autoimmune response, where your body begins to see its own food as a foreign invader. This leads to chronic low-grade inflammation, which is the root cause of heart disease, Alzheimer's, and many forms of cancer. As your doctor, I am deeply concerned that the push for environmental sustainability is being prioritized over human biological compatibility. The forced nature of this transition is also appearing in the form of hidden ingredients in everyday processed foods, where insect powders or soy isolates are added as fillers without prominent labeling. You must become a vigilant reader of every package and look for terms like textured vegetable protein, bioengineered ingredients, or novel protein sources, which are often used to mask the presence of these new meats. At Dr. Queen Senior Healthcare, we advocate for a return to local sourcing whenever possible, because the closer you are to the source of your food, the less likely it is to have been tampered with in a high-tech laboratory. If the price of traditional meat continues to rise, consider focusing on smaller amounts of high-quality pasture-raised eggs or wild-caught fish, which provide the essential omega-3 fatty acids and minerals that synthetic meats simply cannot replicate. We also have to consider the psychological impact of losing our connection to real food, because the act of eating is a foundational human experience that should provide nourishment and pleasure, not just a calculated dose of calories and chemicals. The new meat industry is built on the idea that food is just a delivery system for macronutrients. But as medical professionals, we know that food is information that tells your cells how to behave. If you feed your body synthetic information, you will eventually get a synthetic health outcome. My final advice for you today is to prioritize whole, single-ingredient foods as much as your budget allows, and to stay informed about the shifting regulations in the food industry. Do not let yourself be a passive participant in this global nutritional experiment. Your health is your most valuable asset, and in your senior years, the margins for error are much smaller than they were in your youth. We have explored the 12 signs of urinary health, we have looked at the hidden truths of blood pressure, and now we have seen the reality of the new meat, because at Senior Healthcare, our goal is to give you a 360-degree view of the dangers you face in the modern world.